Hey, welcome back to Counterculture. New background.
New background.
The light
It is
shining
beautiful.
through. Right, we have
Andrew, it is beautiful.
we have a new producer that's really an old producer that's just somehow taken over my responsibilities. Right, she is much better at this whole thing. That is wonderful. Hey, Mark,
Okay.
let's do let's do familiar. Can we? Familiar. Let's go to Daniel chapter 6. I just want to point out one thing, which is never going to happen because I'll start reading and then I'll get lost. But the beginning part of the story of Daniel is fantastic to me, right? It says, this start in verse 1, it pleased Darius, who's the king, to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. Over them three high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these lovely people should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. First of all, I still want to preach that, but let's not do that. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps because an excellent spirit was within him. Now I want to preach that too, but I'm not going to do that either. I'm very disciplined today. Do you see this? Right? And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for a complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground or complaint or any fault because he was faithful, right? No error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it with connection, right, with the law of his God. So listen, I made it through about 5 sermons there to get to the very end, right? These men are looking to set up Daniel, but they can't, right? Because of Daniel's obedience, because of Daniel's faithfulness, because God in Daniel's faithfulness showed him favor, right? And they get to the end and they say, the only way we're going to get this guy is about his God. Right? We're living in a time right now where we're seeing some of this same stuff play out. We're seeing the enemy set up people because not of what they've done at work, just simply because of their God. Jesus referenced this, right, when he said, listen, there's going to come a time where they're going to hate you because of me. Not because of what you're doing, not because of how you're talking, not because just simply because of me. Right? Are you seeing that in our culture today, or is it just me?
I'm seeing it.
Fantastic. What do you mean?
It's just. I hear people talking about we're in the end times, and I've heard other people say, no, we're not in the end times. These are like the pre-end times, like the test end times, whatever. But there is an animosity. There is more and more push away from even considering what God wants. Number one, there's not a seeking of God in areas where culture is being influenced. There is also, it almost seems like an outright animosity toward it.
Yep.
That they are just coming out and saying, I don't care what God says. No, this is something even I've read about with this wokeness that is infiltrating the church. I read something about a young person praying at some rally at a Christian university, saying, "God, you know that we're right on this." Basically, is what they're saying. So now we have shifted to not seeking God, but telling God how He needs to be doing things. Mm-hmm. And when we start saying, no, this isn't how this works. We listen. I love how Frank Turek says, he goes, I'm going to choose to listen to the guy who was raised from the dead. Okay, awesome. We want to tell him, or as one thing I saw on YouTube is, I want to see your manager.
Yeah.
And they're saying that to Jesus. We want to see your manager. He is the manager. And he's not changing his mind. We are better off if we are Daniels than if we are these men. These men. Okay, we're better off doing, and that is it's hard to remember that when there's a lot of pressure coming on with you're not going to be able to get a job if you don't have this jab, or you're not going to be able to do this. You can't talk about that. Well, we can talk about this. I've had people say to me, well, I can't, I got to work Sunday. I said, why don't you ask for off? Well, they won't give it to me. I said, well, they offer other people time that they got to give them time to pray or whatever. I want time. I need an hour to go worship, and then I will come back to work or whatever the deal is. But We think that part of our job is to just roll over and play dead, and that's being gracious. And that is not what Daniel did as we go on to this thing. He says, I got to listen to what God tells me to do and follow him more than. Is that another sermon for you?
It is. The whole thing is, I got like 6 sermons right now because, again, here's another one of the questions I have for you, or a statement that you need to respond to. It says Daniel was distinguished.
Yes.
So the blessing of God, the favor of God, because he was faithful to God, it says that he was distinguished among all of them, and the king was going to set him above everybody, right? So it's going to be this whole 123, one, right, type of thing. And so these men get mad at this, right? They're jealous, and they come up with a plan, right? So it's amazing to me that we've spent, some of us, a lot of time in a culture, right, in an economy where the favor of God has blessed us, right? We've got lots of people that have been raised up by God. But now Daniel's about ready. The rest of the story is about Daniel having to stand up for his God. So God has stood out for him, blessed him. But now, wait a minute. Now you're going to have to stand out for God. Is it possible, in your opinion? Is that where we are, where we've had God stand up for us? But now God's saying, now you're going to have to stand up for me.
Which is what we need more of
Yeah.
today, is people standing up. And it is not a wrong thing. Jesus cleared the temple because what was done there was wrong. It was, and yes, he cleared out the church people, so to speak.
Yep.
But he also, I love it when Jesus says, you go tell that fox, he knew darn good and well. It was not a compliment to call whichever ruler he was talking to there a fox. I think it was Herod. He goes, it was not, it was not, yeah, but he wasn't saying, oh, this is, whatever. He said, you go tell that fox.
Yeah. Yep.
There comes a point, there comes a line. I've been pondering this a little bit about, God desires that no one perish. But at some point, he's going to say, I cannot wait any longer. It is time. I have been more than patient.
I've warned you enough.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Because then people will just, I got time, which is the biggest lie the enemy will tell us, is that we have time.
It's funny because we were reading last night up at Lakeview, 1 Corinthians chapter 7 at the end, where Paul says, towards the end, where Paul says, time is short. Right? Time is short. You need to be about this stuff. That's 2,000 years ago. And we could look back and say, well, he was mistaken. Time wasn't short. They had lots of time. But really what he's talking about to the individuals is you don't know what your time is. Exactly. Your time is short. Yeah. Be about what God wants you to do. Right? And I think what you just said there, I think that's important. I think in this whole thing, like, we need to understand that God blesses us, and then he does expect us to stand up, right? And we see that in the story of Job, right? God blessed Job, but then Satan was like, hey, the only reason that you get to point this guy out is because of this stuff, and God's expecting Job to stand up for him. I think that's important, super important. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to leave it right there because we could both preach a whole sermons, and we probably have.
Be distinguished.
Right. Be distinguished.
Like the 2 distinguished gentlemen here with gray hair.
That is fantastic. Fantastic.
You are very distinguished.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey, we'll see you next time on Counterculture.